Hi everyone, John Heath here again for MiltonRose Learning with another Let's Learn video on A Christmas Carol. Okay, so a Dickensian masterpiece here. So we're going to look at some of the key basics together, just some of the key plot points really. Then we'll untangle some of the key context, all the history for you, for those budding historians. And then we'll have a look at some of the key characters in this novella as well. Okay, so first off then, if we dive in, let's have a good look at initially at some of the genre conventions. So this is very much kind of gothic fiction blended together with social commentary and a moral allegory, which is a great term to learn, where basically not every character, but some of the key characters stand for qualities and kind of parts of Victorian society at the time. So it very much blends a ghost story with a powerful didactic message. That's a great term for your essays. Didactic just meaning it's got a moral at the core. So it's not just a story that's trying to kind of, tell a nice little story. It's actually got a moral message which it's trying to teach to us. And it's about redemption and social justice. So trying to make us all better people, really, during a time of very deep inequality. Okay, so if we have a little look at some of the plot points here then. So as the image kind of shows you there, it revolves around a character called Scrooge, and he's a cold-hearted miser. You never go to Scrooge for money because he won't give you anything. So he refuses to help the poor and he rejects Christmas cheer. He doesn't like it. He kind of sees it as, it's all, kind of a total joke to him really. However, a character of Marley, and Marley's ghost, comes to him and warns him that he will face a terrible fate unless he changes his ways, and he sends 3 spirits to kind of guide him to redemption and try and make him a better person. Okay, then we have, as the plot kind of develops then, the 3 ghosts show Scrooge how his past loneliness, the Cratchits hardship, we'll learn about the Cratchits in a minute, and his grim future, and they stir up basically guilt and fear within Scrooge. And he goes on this kind of moral journey, and he wakes up on Christmas morning transformed as if by magic, and he's a different character now. He's kind, he's generous, and he's full of Christmas spirit. And from Dickens's perspective, he's almost become a bit more of a true Christian. He's refound his Christian roots now because he's now leading a moral life. So it's a real kind of moral journey through the allegorical figure of Scrooge. Okay, now with that in mind then, let's have a nice little look at some of the key context. Okay, so first off then, probably the biggest point of context is the Industrial Revolution. So it's set in Victorian London, and the novella affects the impact of the Industrial Revolution. Now this was a point where basically we were moving from being an agricultural kind of society to an industrial society where people were moving into the cities, and they were moving into these kind of monster factories which were industrialising Britain very, very quickly. Now, the problem with that was we were kind of throwing them into workers into factories and into hastily built kind of accommodation that wasn't very nice at all. So it kind of led to widespread poverty, urban overcrowding, really tough working conditions. The poor didn't really have many rights. So we were industrialising rapidly, but human rights almost were not keeping up with that, and so the working class were having a really, really tough time here. And people like Scrooge were at the top, they're kind of capitalists making a lot of wealth, and those at the bottom, the working class, were really struggling. So a Marxist interpretation of this text is actually really interesting because it reveals that Dickens is trying to stand up for the working class and to actually kind of critique capitalism that was rampant during the Industrial Revolution. Then moving on to the next piece of context, which kind of maps onto what we were just talking about, is wealth inequalities. Now, with the Industrial Revolution, it became a little bit of a kind of capitalist free-for-all. So the rich got richer and the poor got poorer, if I'm simplifying it that way. So there became a massive wealth gap between the super rich like Scrooge and the poor at the bottom. And Scrooge then is used to symbolise, or is an allegorical figure, good term for your essays there. He's an allegorical figure symbolising the selfish capitalist upper class who kind of make all the money but just then ignore all the suffering around them. Okay, they're really making their money off the backs of the working class, and Dickens had a real problem with that, and so he critiques that economic kind of situation in the novella. And then it's kind of symbolised as well, if you kind of Google this or have a little look at this, in the 1834 Poor Law. So this was a piece of legislation which was brought in during the Industrial Revolution, and Dickens strongly opposed this law because it made life very difficult for the poor in order to discourage any reliance on government welfare, such as like dole payments and things like that, which the government did not want to pay out. So it kind of made life, like I say, very, very difficult for them. And Scrooge then, with his harshness, his kind of brutality, is used almost to critique and even to satirise that legislation as kind of stupid and kind of silly and actually almost inhumane to the working class. So that would be a really good one for you to research. Give that a little Google and kind of learn a little bit more about the Poor Law. And it would be really nice if you saw that coming into some of your essays as well. Really good bit of context. Okay then, so now let's round off by learning some of the key characters. Okay, so first off we have Ebenezer Scrooge, as we can see, a charming gentleman. Okay, so he is a cold-hearted, miserly businessman. He won't give you a penny, and he rejects compassion and charity. He's all about making money, and he doesn't really want to share it. Let's put it that way. So he represents selfishness and the moral emptiness of greed in Victorian society, which was purely capitalist. But he does symbolise the potential, though, for personal redemption. He does go on a moral journey throughout this narrative, and he reflects, and then he does come out the other side with a big degree of empathy. So he does actually kind of make himself better throughout this novella, and his journey really is the key narrative arc throughout A Christmas Carol. Then we have Jacob Marley, as we see here. So he is Scrooge's deceased business partner. So he's doomed to wear heavy chains as punishment for his greed. Okay, so in life he was just like Scrooge, really, a kind of greedy kind of character. And those chains symbolise, that everlasting greed. So he represents the consequences of a life lived without compassion or without social responsibility. Basically saying to Scrooge, if you don't wise up and change your ways, you're going to end up like me, like Jacob Marley. So he acts then as a warning figure throughout at the start of the narrative, showing that change is possible, but it's urgent. Okay, if you don't sort this out while you're still alive, Scrooge, you're going to end up in, well, from a Christian interpretation, Victorians were very Christian, then you could end up rotting in hell. It's that serious. Okay, so it really scares Scrooge and makes him kind of want to lead a better life. Okay, then we have the first of the ghosts. Okay, so the ghosts of Christmas past. So the first one is a mysterious spirit, and he shows Scrooge his own early life and kind of what life was like when he was a child. So he therefore represents, or the ghost represents, nostalgia and the emotional roots of the present day. We are all shaped by our past, and myself included, and it's exactly the same as Scrooge. Our pasts kind of shape us and kind of lead us into the present, and the Ghost of Christmas Past kind of shows Scrooge how his past has shaped him and how he can be better. Then the second ghost is the Ghost of Christmas Present, a jolly kind of spirit who reveals the kind of joy and hardship of Christmas across Victorian society. So this ghost embodies abundance, goodwill, and most importantly, social awareness, being aware of the suffering which we can cause if we don't live with compassion. So the Ghost of Christmas Present really symbolises the moral duty to care for others in the here and now. So people who are all around us in the present day, we should care for them more, and Scrooge should care for them more in his present day, especially the poor and the weak. Okay. Then we have the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, a very ominous figure, as the image shows there, who shows that Scrooge the future consequences of his actions. So this ghost represents fear, death, and also the finality of life's choices. Once we die, our choices are set in stone. We have no more chance to change what we did in our lives. So very, very important kind of doom-laden ghost there. So symbolises ultimately the power of our own mortality and facing our mortality to inspire moral and emotional change whilst we're still here on this earth. A very deep kind of emotional message passes through the Christmas Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, that we only have a finite amount of time and we have to make the choices while we're still alive, and that really puts the fear into Scrooge. Then we have Bob Cratchit. So Bob Cratchit is Scrooge's underpaid and kind-hearted clerk, and he's devoted to his family. Okay, and he represents then the struggling Victorian working class who nevertheless remain dignified in poverty. He doesn't have much money, but that doesn't mean to say that he can't keep his dignity, and he does. And he symbolises the strength of love, humility and family despite hardship. And therefore he juxtaposes against Scrooge. Scrooge is at the top, but he's very undignified and he's a miser. But Bob Cratchit is at the bottom, but nevertheless he retains that dignity. So there's a very interesting juxtaposition to explore in your essays there, if you're very smart and you look at the kind of structure of the novella. And then lastly we have Tiny Tim. So love the name. So he is Bob Cratchit's disabled son, but he's still nevertheless full of kindness and hope for the future. So Tiny Tim represents innocence and youth, vulnerability though, and the consequences of social neglect. We shouldn't leave these people behind in society. That's what Dickens' didactic message is all about. And Tiny Tim symbolises the human cost of inequality in a Victorian society that's very harsh and brutal and doesn't really care for the weak, and the need for compassion-driven reform. Okay, we need to kind of look after these people, and you could argue it's almost a forerunner of the welfare state and actually kind of looking after the weakest of society. Okay then, so let's just have a little recap here. So what we've done there, hopefully quite usefully, we've had a really nice beginner's guide to A Christmas Carol. Okay, so we've gone through some of the plot points, such as Jacob Marley's ghost kind of igniting Scrooge to live a better life, and then his moral journey that he went on to lead that better life. We've picked apart some of the key context, such as the Industrial Revolution and the horrors of that for the working class, massive wealth inequalities, and don't forget that 1834 Poor Law. And then we've finished by looking at some of the characters. Now, Scrooge is the main one. If you're lucky, you would get him on an exam paper. But nevertheless, there are important ones, such as the three ghosts that really kind of ignite Scrooge's moral journey. Jacob Marley, as well as the Cratchits, Tiny Tim and Bob Cratchit. And there are a few other characters that we'll be teasing out in later videos. Now, obviously, if that's been useful to you, then please do hit the like, subscribe and tap the bell icon, because it always helps us to grow, which is always much appreciated. And we'll be keep your eyes peeled as well, because we'll be doing more videos on this novella as we move forward. So it just remains to say, obviously, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care.